I have a rendezvous with death. We'll preserve the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
No fear. No political correctness. No wokeism. You're listening to Underground USA.
Thanks for downloading, listening, and sharing. My name is Frank Salvato, and you can find all we do at undergroundusa.com. As we approach the start date for Trump 2.0, it appears some of the more partisan, deep state Uniparty Democrats are starting to regain their confidence after the election slapdown they received from the American people. Not Donald Trump, although he was on the ballot and was the vehicle. That slapdown came from the American people, the voters. Some of these Uniparty Democrats and their RINO compatriots are desperately trying to ignore the mandate for change the American people voted for in November. But then, we can't expect the grifters of the inside-the-beltway bureaucracy to change just because the people demand it. That would be like having representative government. I mean, really? No, they'll have to be expunged from Washington, either through the electoral process, which, given the lack of critical thinking skills among the progressive electorate, is nothing more than a pipe dream, or by the process of that age group dying off of organic, granola-like natural causes, of course. One of those two things will have to happen before we're rid of their constitutional avenue palmistry. One arrogant Uniparty tool, and yes, I'm using the word in the way that you think I am, is U.S. Senator Chris Murphy, a Democrat from Connecticut, who recently attacked the existence of Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy's influence in the Trump 2.0 administration, in a pathetic attempt to define the narrative away from the federal government's bloated budgets, spendthrift spending, and overall fiscal irresponsibility. Murphy said this.
Why did we all of a sudden decide to take this government efficiency task force seriously? Like, why are we acting as if this is legitimate? A, it's not a department. B, it's being run by two billionaires, people who have no idea how important basic government services like Medicaid, Social Security, veterans benefits are to regular people. But there are a lot of Democrats, openly saying, I want to work with them, I want to sit down with this group, giving the appearance that this is something other than either just a TV show or an effort by the billionaire class to privatize government to benefit themselves, which would be par for the course, because all Donald Trump has shown us is that he wants to monetize his power for the benefit of himself and his friends.
So let me get this straight. The guy who gave and plans to give his presidential salary away to charity is only out for himself. That's some twisted and convoluted stuff right there. And as for Musk and Ramaswamy working to kill a continuing resolution, how is killing a bill that was packed with politics, pork, and opportunistic protection privatizing government to benefit themselves? Let's look at some of the more egregious things that the deep state Uniparty reprobates from the left and the RINO classes tried to stuff into that now dead bill. Immunity for J6 committee members. They tried to nullify statutory pay-go so the government doesn't have to pay for programs by offsetting spending elsewhere. Funding for a new Washington Commanders Stadium. Congressional pay increases of $70,000 annually. A renewal of the Global Engagement Center, which served as a vassal for government censorship under the Biden administration. An expansion of vaccine and mask mandates, as well as new pandemic policy. A redistribution of Social Security funds so they can rob that fund yet again. They tried to exempt members of Congress from having to enroll in Obamacare. And they redefined criminal offenders to justice-involved individuals. Add to that the ideological spending that seems to be mandatory when you're a deep state unipartier. Things like $15 million for Egyptians' college tuition. The tuition of Egyptian college students. $15 million. $400,000 for clothing for transgenders. I bet you that crotch fitting's a little interesting. And $500,000 for a DEI zoo. Evidently, animals identified too. Not likely. Aside from the fact that none of it, has anything to do with the core functions of government, we have to realize it's all pork bullshit. How does any of what the far left and RINO classes wanted in the original CR benefit Donald Trump, Elon Musk, or Vivek Ramaswamy? How does it benefit anyone but the devout special interest groups of the neo-Marxist transformative left? Yes, that's what Murphy insisted. That hacking the spendthrift bullshit from a bill meant to fund the core obligations of government is somehow benefiting the billionaires. I said this recently, and I'll say it again. People who have awakened to be pissed off at the opportunistic grifter class that our federal government has become must keep the pressure on. Yes, Donald Trump, a disruptor if there ever was one, emerged victorious in the election. Thank God. But that's not the total of the battle. Not by a long shot. It's just the beginning. In this war to reestablish the people's dominance over a now tyrannical federal bureaucracy, and one that has no understanding at all of fiscal restraint, we cannot let usual suspect uniparty operatives like Murphy, Mitch McConnell, Hakeem Jeffries, Susan Collins, the squad, or at least what's remaining of them, Lisa Murkowski, and the like, we cannot let them reassume the ability to craft the narrative away from the truth. The reason the people, and again I say this, not Donald Trump, although he was the vehicle, but the people, the reason we won in November is because we realized that they've been lying and swindling us for decades and decades, and we finally got off our asses and said, enough. To cede that victory to the grifters of the deep state uniparty after all we've been through would be catastrophic. It would be catastrophic because it would prove the deep staters correct, that they are above the law, that they can do anything they please and get away with it, and that we're as gullible and lazy as they believe us to be. Well, I'm here to tell you these truths. The uniparty deep staters are not above the law, and they must be held accountable for their unethical and malicious actions, like stuffing a CR with pork and special interest agenda items and expecting us to roll over and take it. In fact, how about we all get pissed off enough to demand they actually do their fucking jobs and craft and pass legitimate budgets instead of kicking the can down the road and executing continuing resolutions? How many post offices can be renamed in priority to crafting and passing a budget? To that end, all budgetary items should be legislated on a stand-alone basis so that no one can attach inconsequential items to them in an effort to hide the pork. Hell, every piece of legislation should be executed in a standalone manner, so we know how our elected are voting without any excuses. The Constitution Avenue palmistry must come to an end. People like Murphy and McConnell must be led to the door and tossed out onto their asses. We voted for radical change, a change that brings us back to the Constitution, not further away from it. That said, the uniparty deep staters will fight to the bitter end to hold on to the dynasty of deception and grift they have built. It's up to us to keep the pressure on, to tame and or neuter these con artists and charlatans. And the only way to do that is to, as Donald Trump said on that fateful day, fight, fight, fight. When we come back, our segment on America's Third Watch broadcast nationally from our flagship station WGUL, AM 930 and FM 93.7 in Tampa, Florida.
You're listening to Underground USA.
Bank of America wants to control how you live your life. They're building a system to track your carbon emissions and monitor your driving, coming after your Second Amendment rights, favoring certain home buyers based on their race. Bank of America is using a social score system straight out of China's playbook. Bank of America is obsessed with trying to control your life. What will they do next? Bank of America. Their lies start with their name.
Some people won't give you the real talk on drugs, but it's time we know the facts. Fentanyl is often laced into illicit drugs and used to make fake versions of prescription pills. You can't see it, taste it, or smell it. Suppliers mix fentanyl into their products because it's potent and cheap, and the dealer might not even know. Keep yourself and others safe by knowing the real deal on fentanyl. Get the facts. Go to realdealonfentanyl.com.
News, insight, passion. AM 930, The Answer.
Well, Frank, I almost don't know where to start this morning, but we'll talk about the Biden thing. The Wall Street Journal article is really something, but let's start off with this continuing resolution that went down in flames. What do you think, and where do we go from here?
Well, why not standalone legislation in a clean bill?
Yep.
That's my question. Why attach anything to anything?
Because otherwise it's not as much fun.
Because otherwise they can't slip stuff in like, I don't know, a provision that would allow congressmen to object and therefore obstruct requests for documents related to the January 6th committee.
Yep.
That was right in there. It was 5 provisions that the advanced DEI programs, even though Donald Trump said we're not doing that anymore. This is what happens when you attach bills and do this last minute thing and just have the big four sit down to hammer it out. Especially when 2 people of the big four are blazing rhinos. You have more of the status quo. So I'm glad it went down. I'm one of those people that says, you know what, you're going to play this game? I told you that we weren't going to do this anymore. And that's what Donald Trump said. It's what the American people said. We're not doing this anymore. We want to turn a page. We want a fiscally responsible and trimmed down federal government that doesn't do this stuff. That's what we said with the mandate. So if that's the case, shut it down.
Yeah. Well, now, can Trump simply just call for that standalone? There would be several items, I'm sure, but can he just call for that, or is that just not part of the process at this point?
This brings me to the much, much, much larger point. Who is president of the United States right now?
Well, I'm going with Dr. Jill. No, I'm just teasing.
It's Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Why isn't he being scrutinized for this thing not getting passed?
Well, he may not be quite aware of the whole thing.
Irrelevant. He is the president of the United States. They said he was sharp as a tack. They said he's the greatest president since sliced bread. He's still on duty. And the fact that the media and the left in the House of Representatives is trying to lay this entirely at the feet of Donald Trump before he even takes office. Yeah. It's no wonder that they're talking about, AIDS, you know what? Okay, we'll fess up. We were trying to hide everything from him. Can we focus on that for a little bit over here while we ignore the fact that he's the president and he should be leading this effort?
Indeed.
So everybody wants to point the finger at Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy and look what these people are doing, and this idiot Murphy from Connecticut. I mean, what a partisan hack this guy is. Just a jackass. oh, we got billionaires. Billionaires wanted to kill this CR resolution that we had in the beginning because billionaires didn't get enough pork out of it. What? They're trying to slim things down. They're saying you can't include this. What kind of an imbecile are you? So this is the game that's being played, and the media hasn't asked once. Where's Biden on this? Where's the White House?
Right.
Where's Karine Jean-Pierre to come out and try to explain why the White House isn't doing anything to move this along? Because they want to saddle Trump with it to start attacking him already.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And put him in a bad position before he even takes office. Yeah. That's exactly it.
So you know what? Standalone legislation. And you know what? Let's get rid of the continuing resolution. Let's do a budget.
Now you're just, going into la-la land here.
Yeah, I'm smoking what Hunter's selling. Yeah. No, and that should be step one. Okay, well, if we got to shut down government, then we're going to move around budgets in the executive branch because he can do that. He's the executive, and start moving money from, Department of Education, the EPA, onto things that need to be funded, like paying the soldiers, Social Security, and Medicare and Medicaid. Every other thing should just go, well, I guess we're going into hibernation until we can get a budget passed. And then when the people realize that school's still open because they're locally controlled and not controlled by the federal government, and that EPA regulations by the states still mandate everything that has to be done, they'll realize that we don't need those federal departments. Uh-oh. Then
right.
maybe we can get rid of them then. Uh-oh.
It would really start driving that, wouldn't it? And this is the kind of thing that maybe this shutdown would actually help to clarify here.
Absolutely. So I'm all for it. Let it happen.
Well, Frank, of course, part of this continuing resolution drama also involves the idea of abolishing the debt ceiling limit, which means every couple of years or whenever it runs out, they've got to go and they've got to vote to raise it again. They always raise it. It's been raised some 78 times since 1960, I think. But I think Donald Trump wants to get rid of it altogether. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, this is part of the problem with a continuing resolution. When you're always voting to keep the status quo and add just a little bit because things are more expensive today than they were yesterday, and we'll deal with it later on down the line, you're not dealing with a budget. There should be no job more important for Congress than to hammer out the individual budgets and pass them one at a time. And that's it. We haven't had, and I believe I'm correct in this, we haven't had a actual budget passed into law and implemented since the 1990s.
Yeah, I think maybe under Bill Clinton, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Now, how many post offices have been renamed? How many things has Congress done that are so inconsequential to what needs to happen at the core of our government that they were just too busy to actually sit down and hammer out a budget that they have to live with? Every single family has to.
Yeah. Boy, your key term there was live with. They don't want to live with it. They want to be fluid about it. They want to get what they need when they think they need it, and just have it be, not written in stone.
When they raise taxes, and Democrats do it repeatedly and just continuously, when they raise taxes, that's a byproduct of not living within your means when you're the government. Well, we need more money. When they say we're giving another $100 billion to Ukraine, we're giving another $10 billion to Sierra Leone because they have this project that they asked us for. That's all money that is coming out of your tax dollar because they haven't budgeted correctly. If they budgeted correctly, State Department would have a solid budget. That's it. When you're out, you're out.
Yep, that's right. And so then you can say things like, I'm sorry, it's not in the budget.
Yeah, it's to spend it wisely. Budget. That's why it's called a budget. So this idea that, we funded government with a continuing resolution. Look at the words. Continuing resolution. That's not a budget. It's not a budget. So I say shut it down. Shut it down. And like I said, because he is the head of the executive branch, and every executive branch department is under him, which gives him the right to fire and rearrange, he can take those existing budgets that are still there, the operating capital that they still have, and move it around. Biden did it. Obama did it. So just do it. And there's a very good sentiment going around here. Republicans have a great opportunity to throw this back on the Democrats, and especially Hakeem Jeffries when he came out. They're trying to hurt average Americans. Put a clean bill on the floor and then dare them to pass it.
Yep, exactly. Well, of course, no, I'm with you on Hakeem Jeffries, and a lot of people, though, are going after Speaker Johnson. And do you think he's going to stay Speaker for long, or does somebody else want to step up? I just don't know of anybody who wants to at this point.
There's too much horse trading, and it's too early to tell about any of that stuff for the next Congress. I know everybody likes to preload things. I know Mitch McConnell liked to preload stuff for the next Senate with Mr. Thune as the Senate Majority Leader. But the next Congress gets to vote what they want to vote, and they can do whatever they want. They can remove leaders. They can hold new elections for leadership. They can do whatever they want. It depends on how serious they are about actually hearing the mandate the people gave Donald Trump for change.
Mm-hmm.
They want to make Trump he's president now. No, he's not. He's president-elect. And I'm going to say this again. Joe Biden's still president. So if there's a close down of the government, it's under his watch. It's his fault. He's the executive right now, whether you like it or not, because idiots voted for the guy. And then it didn't question 18 million extra votes when they came in.
That's right.
So, this is a Biden thing. If the government gets shut down, Democrats did it because they loaded up the continuing resolution, not being brave enough to actually want to have a budget because they like to keep the grift going. Yeah, no. This is what I meant in my last piece about don't let the grifters take over the creation of the narrative again. We just got finished going, wow, the truth is coming out. Isn't that refreshing? You can't fall back on your laurels now. You can't say we won the election, the fight is over. You gotta keep the pressure on. The truth has to be maintained. And that means when people like Murphy and Jeffries come out saying all this garbage about, billionaires didn't get enough in the CR, so Donald Trump came out and killed it. What do you do? Load a rifle, come out and shoot the 1,500 pages? No. You said it's a bad bill, and it was a bad bill because it was stuffed with special interest pork.
Yeah.
And if you're going to blame the speaker for anything, you got to blame him for not bringing a clean bill to the floor.
Right. Well, the secondary bill, which was cut down from about 1,500 to about 116 pages, that still didn't pass. What does Donald Trump do to try to save it? I don't know if he can get it passed, but how does he work with these Republicans who wouldn't vote for it, even though he put his imprimatur on it? Where does he go from here?
I don't think he puts his imprimatur on it. I really don't. He's not the president yet.
Right. No, I hear you. Yeah, but this was evidently the Trump-approved bill.
Yeah, that's what they're branding it, and this is my point about who's creating the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
He objected to it, and rightly so. It was stuffed with pork. And he should have objected to it. He ran on a platform of, we're going to streamline and cut waste. So he doesn't have to like it, and he doesn't have to support it, and he doesn't have to anoint it. But it's not his purview right now. It is the purview of the House Republicans, and the people who actually shot down the 1,500-page bill, I applaud them. The people who keep trying to make this an omnibus package, I condemn them.
Mm-hmm.
Just bring the bill to the floor. That's it. If you want to vote on an additional bill that gives $100 billion for disaster relief, I am sure people would like to know who wouldn't vote for that.
Right.
But that's the problem when you have these omnibus bills. You get to pack it with pork, and you get away with this stuff under the guise of, if you didn't vote for it, then you hate people who went through disasters. If you had standalone legislation on everything you had to do, it puts everybody on record for how they vote, yay or nay. Are you for funding the government? Because that's the only thing in the bill. Well, yes, I am. Good. You didn't close down government. Next.
Right. No, you're exactly right. And what it does is it completely simplifies things. And so, again, it puts people on record, and it eliminates them being able to sandwich in all this other stuff, which is what people complain about to begin with.
Absolutely. It eliminates the, I had to vote for the bill because, it had helping puppies across the street. What kind of an evil bastard wouldn't want to help puppies across the street?
Right. Exactly right.
No, government's not supposed to do that. If a good Samaritan wants to help, and I love puppies, don't write me and tell me I hate puppies.
Well, we've been talking about the CR and everything, but there was another story that caught my eye, and this had to do with a migrant sex offender, I hate to say. He was in the country illegally, but he was in jail in New York City after he got set free from jail as well, because he was had molested a child, and evidently they weren't cooperating with ICE, and they weren't being notified that there was a sex offender being let loose. I mean, this is the kind of thing that, talk about getting a handle on spending, we got to get a handle on the bad guys that have come here.
Well, this is when a legitimate Department of Justice, we don't have one right now, this is when a legitimate Department of Justice would file prosecutorial misconduct charges against the people who weren't cooperating with ICE.
Mm-hmm.
They are party to a crime. Well, we don't believe ideologically that we should report this illegal alien here who molested a child and has now committed murder. Well, okay, fine. Then you're complicit in the abuse of a child and a murder, and you'll be brought up on the charges that are associated with that. There's laws against this stuff.
Well, that's exactly right. Yeah.
If you had an attorney general that wasn't completely corrupt and bitter because he didn't get elevated to the Supreme Court, and I think that's really the big bulk of why Merrick Garland is such a jerk, has been such a jerk and a politicized jackass his entire tenure, is because he's bitter that he didn't get elevated to the Supreme Court. The country dodged a bullet, and he's just this bitter old man that really shouldn't be in politics anymore. He should be looking at cases like that saying, even if he doesn't agree with the law, I may not agree with that law, but it's the law. And as the top law person in the United States, I've got to enforce the law. That's why we're a nation of laws and not of men, as John Adams said. So yeah, any elected official who knew of anything about an illegal alien who either committed a crime other than crossing the border illegally, which is a crime anyway,
right?
Especially when it's against children, if it's regarding trafficking, if it's involving assault, any of the big crimes, you should charge them and make them have their day in court. Justified. I want to hear what your justification, what's your defense for shielding a child molester and now a murderer from having been deported as the law requires? What's your defense, ma'am or sir?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you would think that it would be, you'd be so ashamed that you did, shield that person or say, okay, we're not going to help out here for those very reasons that you're talking about. Where is the shame in all of this?
Well, I mean, what jury's not going to convict? There isn't a jury in the world who's going to say, oh, your ideology kept a child molester on the street who ended up murdering somebody. Yeah, you've got culpability there, buddy.
Right.
It would also see an exodus from that prosecutorial entity's body of the underlings who didn't want to say, you know what? I don't want to be working on a case that I can get charged with being complicit in the crime. If they're coming after people in locales where the DA or the state's attorney is taking an ideological stance, I'm not gonna get thrown under the bus because he orders me not to prosecute and don't cooperate with ICE or the federal authorities. Mm-hmm. And that makes that person ineffective in the office. People, you've got to know who you're voting for, and you've got to vote for people who are going to stand up for the little guy. People who are illegally here are not the little guy. The people in this story, the little guy is the child that was molested and the person who was murdered. Yeah, exactly. And of course, again, you wonder where the shame is in all of this. And a lot of times the far left will say, how many is enough? And I think you could turn it right back at them and say, how many children have to be, molested or killed or what have you? How many is enough before your ideology stops informing you to do these things? Because, Frank, when, it makes me think of like the Soviet Union or other places where the ideology was so pervasive that it didn't allow you to actually use any real common sense. That's the difference, I think, with conservatives, is they don't have a, quote, ideology that they constantly have to turn to. They're using common sense and practicality. Well, this goes all the way back to the days of Andrew Jackson, when the Jacksonian Democrat Party was created against the National Republicans. The National Republicans believed that you had to have a level of morality in the public discourse and the way government was run. And the Democrats just believed we have an ideology and you don't deviate from it. And that is still exists in their party today. And with the injection of the neo-Marxists and the neo-Bolsheviks of the very far left, you've got now a caustic Marxist ideology, totalitarian in nature, that is all ideologically driven instead of morally driven. If it was morally driven, you'd find somebody, and you heard somebody molested a child, you would turn them into the authorities because they have to pay a price.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why they try to throw everything back on Trump, as if Trumpism, quote unquote, is some kind of ideology that makes people not think for themselves. It's actually the furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah, when you're talking about the people who want to make America great again, you're talking about the reinstitution of individuality. Mm-hmm. It's freedom for the individual to make decisions on their own and a smaller footprint of government in their lives. This all comes down to the very simple dichotomy here. Republicans and the MAGA movement especially, and Republican, I'm going to pull back, not Republicans, the MAGA movement. There's a lot of Republicans who are into the Uniparty deep state thing, and I don't like them anymore. And I'm not going to defend them anymore. They deserve to go as well. They're part of the problem. But the people who believe in smaller government and more individual freedom and responsibility exist on that, what you call the Trumpism MAGA movement. Mm-hmm. People on the left and the far left, they believe bigger government, nanny state. So which one do you want? Less freedom and nanny state, or more freedom and you got to step up to be a little bit more responsible for your actions? I know people who actually have a brain larger than that of a pea will go with the individual freedom one.
You're listening to Underground USA.
Our federal government has been co-opted by the globalist sycophants of the deep state bureaucracy. At every turn, this bureaucracy expands its power over both the American people and the states in which they live. The framers knew corruptible men would one day bastardize their elected authorities and attempt to centralize government in Washington, D.C. That's why they gave us the 9th and 10th Amendments. That's why they left standing the tool of nullification. In his book, Nullification, The Case for Decentralizing the Federal Government, Frank Salvato lays out how states can claw back their constitutionally mandated powers from the overreach of the federal government, doing so in a manner that prevents a second bloody civil war. Get your copy of Nullification, The Case for Decentralizing the Federal Government. Available on Amazon.com in Kindle form and paperback.
If you like the podcast, please head on over to undergroundusa.com and sign up for our Substack. It comes straight into your email inbox, circumventing the censors and the fact-checkers of social media who are increasingly being found to be untruthful and, well, they're not based in fact. And as Christmas and New Year approaches, please talk politics, current events, religion with your family, friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. When we have these conversations, when we talk to each other about the things that are important in our lives, we realize that we have a lot more in common than we have in difference. And when we have that commonality, that e pluribus unum, the deep state loses its power because we see them for who they are, dividers who are trying to manipulate us to their own ends. You're listening to Underground USA. No fear, no wokeism, no political correctness, and no deep state. My name is Frank Salvato.